What would you do if one small test destroyed everything you thought you knew about your life? That question lived inside me from the day my daughter gave me a DNA kit. I believed it would be a fun birthday gift. I thought I would learn about my ancestors, maybe a little Irish or Scottish blood. I did not know that the results would change the way I saw my family, my marriage, and even myself. My name is Hannah Williams. I am 54 years old, and I live in Adelaide, Australia. I had been married to David for 25 years. Together we had a daughter, Grace, who was 23 and living in Melbourne. Our life looked calm from the outside. We had a small house with a wide garden where David liked to grow tomatoes and I liked to keep flowers. We enjoyed walks by the river, lazy Sundays with barbecues, and evenings watching old movies. I often thought that at my age, peace was all I needed. Before we continue, I would love to ask you something. Where are you listening from? Which country? Which city? Please share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, do not forget to subscribe. When Grace gave me the DNA kit, I smiled. It was her way of keeping me busy after she moved away. She said it would be fun to know more about our family roots. I agreed and sent my saliva sample without thinking much about it. David laughed when he saw me sealing the box. He said, "Soon you will discover you are related to the Queen." We both laughed and then forgot about it. Weeks passed, life stayed the same. Until the email arrived. It was a sunny morning when I opened my laptop and saw the message. "Your results are ready." My hands shook a little as I clicked. The first part was simple. 60% British, 30% Irish, 10% unknown European. Nothing strange. But then I scrolled down and froze. A section said close family match. It listed a man named Thomas Brown. It said he was my half-brother. I read the line again and again. My father had passed away 15 years earlier. My mother was still alive, living quietly in a retirement home. I had grown up as an only child. How could I have a half-brother? I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. My first thought was that it must be a mistake. Then I felt a wave of fear. If Thomas was my half-brother, it meant my father was not my real father, or my mother had kept a secret for her whole life. I wanted to call her, but my hands felt heavy. I closed the laptop and sat in silence. I told myself to breathe, but my heart was racing. That evening, I told David. We were sitting in the living room with cups of tea. I said, "The DNA results came." He asked what they showed. I told him about Thomas Brown. I expected him to laugh, to say it was nonsense, but he did not laugh. He looked at the carpet, his lips pressed tight. Something in his face changed. At that moment, I felt something was wrong. His silence felt heavier than my shock. I asked him if he believed it could be true. He said, "Sometimes DNA can be confusing." But his voice was flat. He did not meet my eyes. My stomach turned cold. I went to bed that night with too many questions. I thought about calling Grace, but I did not want to worry her. I thought about calling my mother, but I knew she would deny everything. My mind went back to David. Why did he look so nervous? It was my family's secret, not his, or so I thought. I closed my eyes, but I could not sleep. The house felt strange. Even the sound of David breathing beside me did not calm me. For the first time in many years, I felt alone in my own home. The next morning, David acted normal. He made toast, watered the plants, and asked about my day. but his eyes still avoided mine. I kept thinking about the DNA results. I decided to search for Thomas Brown online. I typed his name into social media. Many faces came up, but one made me stop. A man in his early 50s, with the same dark eyes as mine. He lived in Sydney. His profile said he was looking for family connections. I stared at his photo for a long time, then closed the page. I was not ready to reach out. I was not even ready to believe it was true. Days passed, but the thought of Thomas did not leave me. At the same time, David grew quieter. He spent more time outside, in the garden, pretending to fix things. At night, he turned away from me, in bed. Something was wrong. I could feel it. It was like a shadow moving through our house. I wanted to ask him again, but fear kept me silent. I was afraid of his answer. I was afraid of what I might lose. A week later, another email arrived. This time it was from Thomas himself. The subject line read, "We might be family." My chest tightened. I opened it slowly. The message was simple. "Hello, Hannah. I think we may be related. The test says we are half-siblings. I know this must be a shock. It is a shock for me too. I would like to talk if you are ready." I closed the laptop and pressed my hands to my face. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. I felt empty. My whole life story had cracks now. That night, I could not hold my silence any longer. I told David about the email. I expected comfort, maybe a hug, but instead, he froze. His face went pale. He whispered, "You spoke to him?" I shook my head. "No, I just received the message." He exhaled, long and heavy, like he had been holding his breath for years. I asked, "What is it, David? Do you know something?" He looked at me with tired eyes. He said, "There are things you do not know about me." My heart stopped. I could not breathe. I thought the DNA test had shaken my family tree. I did not know it was about to shake my marriage too. David's words stayed in my head like a storm. "There are things you do not know about me." I had been married to him for 25 years, yet at that moment I realized I did not know the man beside me. I wanted to ask everything at once, but my throat closed. I sat still, waiting for him to speak. He stood up and walked to the window. The night outside was quiet, but inside my chest, there was only noise. After a long silence, he turned back and said, "I did a DNA test too. Years ago." My body went cold. He sat down again, his hands shaking. "I have a son," he said. "Before I met you, I was with someone for a short time. I did not know she was pregnant. A few years ago, he found me through a DNA test. His name is Aaron. He lives in Sydney." My mind spun. My husband had a son he had never told me about. My thoughts jumped to Thomas, the half-brother from my own results, two secrets arriving at the same time. It felt like the ground under me was breaking. I could not speak. I only looked at David. His face was full of fear, maybe shame. He whispered, "I did not tell you because I was scared. I thought you would leave me. I thought it was in the past, but then he contacted me, and I started speaking to him." My heart broke. It was not only the secret that hurt me. It was the fact that he had been talking to his son while I lived beside him, blind to the truth. For years, he had smiled at me, eaten with me, shared a bed with me, while hiding a part of himself. I went to bed without saying a word. I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling. I thought about my father, who was not my real father. I thought about my half-brother Thomas, waiting in Sydney for an answer. I thought about David's son Aaron, living a whole life that I had never been told about. It was as if my family tree had been cut into pieces, and I no longer knew where I belonged. The next morning, David tried to act normal. He made breakfast, but the smell of toast turned my stomach. He said, "We can talk later if you want." I said nothing. My silence was my answer. Inside me, pain mixed with anger. For 25 years, I had believed we shared everything. Now I felt like I had been living in someone else's shadow. He looked at me with tired eyes and whispered, "I am sorry." But sorry felt too small. I went to visit my mother that afternoon. She lived in a quiet home on the edge of the city. I sat with her in the small garden. She looked older, weaker, but her eyes were still sharp. I asked her directly, "Did Dad raise me as his own? Was he not my real father?" She froze, and then her lips trembled. After a long silence, Faswanja said, "It was a mistake, Hannah." "A mistake from my youth. Your father knew. He chose to love you anyway." My body shook. The man I had called Dad had known the truth all along. He had carried the weight of my mother's choice without ever telling me. I felt dizzy. I left quickly and drove home, tears burning my face. The road looked blurred through my eyes. I thought about the lies we keep, thinking they protect love, but lies do not protect. They poison slowly. My father had died with the truth in his heart. My mother had grown old with guilt. And now my husband was carrying a secret child. Everywhere I looked, there were cracks. At home, David was waiting. He said, "Hannah, please, we need to talk." I wanted to scream, but my voice came out quiet. "How long?" He looked at the floor. 5 years, he said. He found me 5 years ago. I shook my head. 5 years of hiding. 5 years of sharing our bed while speaking to another child. He said he had met Aaron once, in Sydney, during a business trip. He said they had lunch together. My chest tightened. The betrayal felt deeper than any knife. I walked out of the house and sat in the garden. The sun was hot on my face, but I felt cold inside. I heard birds singing, but the sound only made me feel more alone. I thought of Grace, my daughter. She had trusted us to be her example of marriage, of family. What would she think if she knew the truth? I wanted to protect her, but I also wanted to protect myself. I was torn in two. Days passed in silence. David moved around the house like a stranger. We shared a roof, but not a heart. At night, I lay on the edge of the bed, my back turned to him. He whispered my name sometimes, but I stayed quiet. I did not have the strength to answer. I felt like a ghost in my own home. One evening, I opened my laptop again. Thomas had sent another message. "I would love to meet you. We can talk about our father or about life. I only want to know you." I stared at the words. My heart was afraid, but also curious. Maybe he held answers. Maybe meeting him would bring me peace. I wrote back a short line. "Yes, we can meet." A week later, I met Thomas in a small cafe in Sydney. He was kind, with the same dark eyes as mine. When he smiled, I saw something familiar. We spoke for hours. He told me about his life, his work, his family. He said he too had grown up believing he was an only child. He only learned the truth after his mother died, when he took the test. He said, "I do not want to replace anyone. I only want to know my sister." My eyes filled with tears. I had lost one truth, but I had gained another. When I came home, David was waiting again. He asked, Did you meet him? I nodded. His face fell, but I did not feel sorry. I told him, I cannot live in lies anymore. I need honesty, even if it hurts. He looked at me and whispered, I am scared you will leave. I answered, I am scared I will stay and lose myself. That night, I lay awake again. My mind was full of questions. Could I forgive him? Could I live with his hidden son, knowing he had chosen to hide him for 5 years? Could I trust him again? The walls of our house felt heavy. Every corner carried silence instead of love. The next morning, Grace called. She asked how we were. I lied and said we were fine. My voice broke a little, but yet she did not notice. When I hung up, I cried. I wanted to protect her from the truth, but I also felt alone carrying the weight. David came into the room. He touched my shoulder softly and said, I love you. I looked at him and said, love without truth is not love. He lowered his eyes and said nothing more. The days turned into weeks. I met Thomas again, and each time I felt a little stronger. He gave me a sense of family that I had lost, but at the same time, I pulled further away from David. His words felt empty now. His smiles did not reach me. I remembered our wedding day, his promises, his vows. They now sounded like echoes from a stranger. One night, as I sat by the window, David came and stood beside me. He said, if you want me to stop speaking to Aaron, I will. I looked at him and shook my head. It is not about stopping. It is about trust. You already chose to hide him from me. You already broke us. His eyes filled with tears. He whispered, I only wanted peace, I replied. Peace built on lies is not peace. It is silence waiting to break. That night I slept in the guest room. The bed was cold, but I preferred the cold to the weight of betrayal. I lay there and whispered to myself, what will I do now? My life had split into 2 paths, one with him, broken but familiar. One without him, empty but honest. I did not know yet which path I would choose, but I knew one thing. The DNA test had not only revealed a half-brother, it had revealed the cracks in my marriage, the silence in my house, and the truth I had been too blind to see. My life would never be the same again. I woke up in the guest room again, the pale light of dawn touching the window. The air was cool, but my chest felt heavy with heat. I had not spoken a real word of love to David in weeks. We lived together like polite strangers, sharing the same roof but not the same heart. Every time I looked at him, I remembered the years he had spoken to Aaron in secret. 5 years of meals, birthdays, and anniversaries, all covered with a hidden truth. I wondered if I could ever forgive such a silence. That morning, I made tea and sat in the garden. The birds sang, the smell of wet earth filled the air, and for a moment I felt calm. But then I remembered Thomas, my half-brother, waiting for me in Sydney. He had sent me another message the night before. I am glad to know you. You are not alone anymore. His words touched me. They made me realize that my family story was bigger than I thought. At the same time, David's son Aaron was also there, somewhere in Sydney, carrying his own pain. I felt like life had drawn 2 new lines through my heart. One led to Thomas, one led to Aaron. Both lines had been hidden from me until now. Later that day, David came into the garden. He sat across from me, his shoulders bent, his face older than before. He said, Hannah, I do not want to lose you. Please tell me what to do. His voice was weak, almost breaking. I looked at him and felt a mix of anger and sadness. I wanted to believe him, but my heart was tired. I said, "You had 5 years to tell me. You had every chance to be honest. Now it feels too late." He lowered his head and said nothing more. Silence filled the space between us like a wall. That evening, I opened my diary. I had not written in years, but words spilled out of me. I wrote about my father, who had raised me with love, even though he was not my blood. I wrote about my mother, who had lived with her secret until it grew into a shadow on her face. I wrote about David, who had chosen silence instead of honesty. And I wrote about myself, a woman caught in the middle of all these truths, trying to find her own way. When I finished, I closed the diary and cried softly. The next week, I decided to meet Thomas again. This time, I invited him to Adelaide. He came on a sunny afternoon, carrying a small gift, a book of Australian poems. When I hugged him, I felt something I had not felt in years. It was a sense of belonging. We sat in the garden, drank tea, and spoke about everything. He told me about his children, about his wife, about the years he had lived without knowing me. I told him about Grace and about my simple life in Adelaide. For the first time, I felt lighter. The weight of the secret was still heavy, but sharing it with him gave me strength. When Thomas left, David asked me, "How was it?" I said, "It was good." His eyes looked sad, but I could not comfort him. He had been part of the silence, not part of the truth. That night, I lay in the guest bed again. I thought about how many nights I had wasted in silence. I thought about the years left in my life. At 54, I was not young, but I was not finished. I still had time to choose. One evening, I finally spoke to Grace. I had kept the truth from her for too long. We sat together on a video call, her face glowing on the screen. I said, "Grace, there is something I need to tell you." My voice shook as I told her about Thomas, about the DNA test, about David's son Aaron. Her eyes filled with tears. She whispered, "Mom, why did no one tell us the truth?" My heart broke, but I felt relief too. At last, the silence was broken. She said, "I still love you, Mom." Nothing changes that. Her words gave me hope. In the days after, I noticed David tried harder. He cooked dinner, washed dishes, even bought flowers. But his full efforts felt empty. They could not cover the years of silence. One night he asked, "Can we start again?" I looked at him for a long time. My heart wanted to say yes, but my mind said no. I whispered, "I cannot start again with someone who kept so much from me." His eyes filled with water. He turned away, and I knew something had ended between us. I began to think of my future without him. It was a painful thought, but also a clear one. I imagined living alone in a small house, visiting Thomas in Sydney, seeing Grace in Melbourne. I imagined mornings with no secrets and nights with no heavy silence. It would be lonely, but it would be honest. I told myself that sometimes peace comes not from holding on, but from letting go. The final moment came on a Sunday. The house was quiet, the air heavy. I told David to sit down. He looked nervous, his hands shaking. I said, "David, I have loved you for many years. But love without truth cannot last. I cannot carry this silence any longer. I need to live with honesty, even if it means living alone." He begged me to stay. He said, "I will never hide anything again." But his words came too late. Trust, once broken, does not return so easily. I stood up, walked to the bedroom, and began to pack a small bag. Grace called that evening. I told her I had left David. She was shocked, but she said, "Mom, I support you. You deserve honesty. You deserve peace." Her voice gave me courage. That night, I stayed in a small hotel near the sea. The room was quiet, the bed cold, but my heart felt lighter than it had in months. I looked out at the waves crashing against the shore and whispered to myself, "I am free." Weeks passed. I moved into a small rental flat. It was nothing special, but it was mine. I visited Thomas again, and we laughed over stories of our childhoods. I called Grace often, and our bond grew stronger. David still sent messages asking me to return. Sometimes I read them, sometimes I deleted them without opening. I did not hate him, but I could not go back. My life with him was a house built on silence, and I wanted walls built on truth. One evening, I wrote in my diary again. I wrote, "The DNA test broke me, but it also saved me. It showed me the lies I was living in. It gave me a brother I never knew. It gave me the chance to start again." I closed the book and felt calm. For the first time in many years, my heart was quiet. Not the quiet of secrets, but the quiet of peace. I know my life is shorter now than it once was, but I also know the years left will be honest. I will eat meals in silence if I must, but that silence will not be filled with lies. I will sleep alone if I must, but my bed will not be shared with secrets. The DNA test had hurt me, but it had also freed me. And when I look at the sea now, I no longer see loss. I see truth, wide and deep, and I know I chose the right path. I chose myself. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, please support this channel. Subscribe so you can hear more stories every week. Like and share this video with someone who understands what it feels like to live with love and truth. And tell me in the comments, would you have stayed or would you have left?